Welcome to Cup of Joe with Idaho Joe. Interesting predicament going on these days, we got a thread coming up on Kerberos Live talking about the long road to fascism. You know what? I'm actually going to pull it up, and one of our other hosts actually comes up and is going to talk about that in a future show. I'm not sure exactly when it is they got it scheduled, but that's actually one of the conversations they've had. What does fascism represent in America? What are we doing to combat it? What are we talking about, in so many other issues that are along those lines? Because we talk about the path to liberty. We talk about what fascism means, what, stronger together, Mussolini, he started out with fascism back in the old days, World War II, talking about industry and government, stronger together. And we start talking about what all of the governments around World War II were actually doing. Whether you were talking about FDR, whether you were talking Churchill, Lenin, a number of these different countries, different people involved, Hitler, Mussolini, Hirohito, what was going on with Taiwanese, then the Chinese government, as they were trying to fight what was going on with the Japanese invasion, the Japanese occupation, what was going on in mainland Asia. And the idea of state capitalism. And this is one of these variations of capitalism that we don't really talk about that often. The reason why is because we don't want to admit that state capitalism has been the primary economic system of every nation in the world since before World War II. Okay, coming out of World War I, we moved into this idea of state capitalism. The state owns you. The state produces its money. The state controls. It has a central bank. It runs things. You had FDR doing things like the Tennessee Valley Authority, building massive projects, massive electric projects to provide electricity all across the United States. You had Hitler taking over automobile production in Germany. Everything that Mussolini was doing in Italy, and the automation, everything that was happening in Russia. I'm going to get this next. Lenin, World War II. His move to automation. Move all the people to the cities to teach them how to do the industry. Automate. Build cars, build tractors, build automobiles. And what they did is they took all of the horses, they took all of the livestock off of the farms that they used to do for doing the plowing, maintaining the regenerative agriculture. They took all of the major livestock off of these farms and forced the farmers to go to tractors, forced them to go to cars. And all of the young kids that used to live out on the farms, because now you didn't need as many people because they had tractors. You no longer needed the husbandry skills because you needed mechanic skills. Took all of these kids and sent them off to the factories in the cities. And it decimated, the major fauna, all around the world. Horses, mules, This entire project of using animals, megafauna, in order to maintain regenerative agriculture. World War II, there was not a nation in the world. They may have wanted to call themselves capitalists. They may have wanted to call themselves a democracy. There were lots of things they wanted to call themselves. But at the end of the day, by the time we went into World War II, every major nation in the world was practicing an economic system we currently call state capitalism. Government and industry stronger together. And what does that represent here in the United States today? Well, it's the moving in of this concept. Every time there are major innovations in society, there's resistance. You take a look at what that resistance means in a lot of ways. What's the education process? What are the social cues? Are we dealing with an overpopulation issue? Are we dealing with degeneracy as it moves into the way we interact with the welfare state? Or in this case, the way we interact with late stage state capitalism. This is absolutely it. Urbanization is psychologically traumatizing for a civilization. Okay? Rome revisited. Germany, the French, Nigerians. Every time you reach this urbanization of the capital, colonialization, where the resources, where we send soldiers, out to collect resources from the colonies and ship them back to the capital. The capital ends up with too many that just don't have anything to do. And other people with too much money because they've been exploiting the colonies. What happens when you have it? Well, you have degeneracy. People are no longer taking care of themselves. They're no longer looking out for themselves. They're no longer looking out for their best self because they're chasing the dream of urbanization. They're trying to hide the trauma in hedonism. So many of the different things can be involved in that process. A lot of it does come down to this concept of urbanization. Because we were not meant to be crammed into cities of 100,000 people. Okay, 100,000, you still don't, but you're starting to feel the trauma of urbanization. You're starting to feel the claustrophobia mixed with the agoraphobia. It is trauma. Urbanization is trauma. Now, it was part of what it was is we were trying to create this urban empire, urban capital, the urbanization of the United States, the urbanization of the globalized world. They were fighting the Luddites, who were going, automation is going to take our jobs. We can't do this new stuff. We can't, all this newfangled stuff, and you ended up with communities in, what do we call them these days? Company towns, mining, so on. So you end up with this entire idea of urbanization and a counterculture that starts to resist the trauma of the urbanization, as well as, so many different ways of coping. So many different ways of coping. The idea that you got as many bars as you got churches in some cities. For every institution of sin, every bar, there's another institution of redemption. Go out and commit all your sins on Saturday night. Go to church the next day to repent. And here we are, late stage state capitalism. The government has created a working class, a welfare class, a median class, and the corporate class. So we're looking at classism all across because, well, when you're dealing with urbanization, when you're dealing with that kind of concentration of so many people in a given place, you get hierarchy. Mike likes to talk about it. Dunbar. Our Dunbar numbers. How many people before you end up with the next tier of hierarchy? 500, 5,000, 10,000. This is one of the other things. Anonymity of the city. Crime, loneliness. You can live right next to each other and still not know your neighbor. You can listen to them. Having sex through the walls of your apartment complex and still not know who they are. Kind of anonymity. In addition to that, you're dealing with poverty that comes with that because you are looking at classism. Some people are getting paid extremely well, some people aren't. You reach a point in the urbanization where people sell their bodies. Okay, Sodom and Gomorrah, Babel. How concentrated can we get people before we lose the sense of community? And it all becomes the chase for happiness. Except it's not really happiness we're chasing. What we're chasing is a coping mechanism for trauma. Okay. Now that's a lot of the lead in for what I got tonight. Reason why is because we got things going on in Idaho. Believe it or not, 2 or 3 days ago, we had Idaho trending in politics and Twitter. You know what I did? I went in and I took a look. Why was Idaho trending in Twitter politics? So many reasons. So many reasons. First, libraries. Okay. Libraries, right? Who's got a problem with libraries? You go in, you sit down, you pull a book off of the shelf. Maybe they got a couple nice comfy chairs you can sit down and read. You bring the kids in, you let them sit down in the young adult section, pull out, Percy. Percy pulling out, the miniseries, animagraphs. God, what else falls into that? Mockingbird, Mockingjay. You got all of these young adult reading dystopian fiction. What is it about dystopian fiction that there are so many different authors, sitting on library shelves? Anyway, that's a side point. We have people here in the state of Idaho that are showing up and harassing librarians. Librarian health insurance programs in the state of Idaho. Okay? Health insurance. State of Idaho. We have libraries here in the state of Idaho. They're part of a health program, health insurance, right? We, in the state of Idaho, our health insurance programs that we've been working with to make sure that our librarians get health insurance, have canceled all the health insurance programs for the librarians in the state of Idaho. Why? Because people are showing up with guns to protest books that aren't even in the libraries in question. Literally, we have reached the point right now where libraries in the state of Idaho are like Hypatia Lee, Library of Alexandria, just little everyday small town librarians, are being threatened to be skinned alive and burned at the stake for making sure that kids have books to read. They show up, they protest the books. Most of these libraries have none of these books. Nobody asked for any of these books to be stocked. in any of these libraries. So these books that they think are in these libraries aren't even there. And they're threatening to kill librarians over books that aren't even in the libraries that the librarians work at. Libraries in the state of Idaho. Was not on my 2022 bingo card. Sorry, it wasn't. 2022 bingo card did not have Idaho librarians reprising the role of Hypatia Lee in the Library of Alexandria. Okay, that just happens to be one issue. How you doing, Dolores? Thank you. This week, yesterday, we had school board elections in the state of Idaho. All across the state of Idaho, school boards, we're running. It was the election for the school boards. This is ironic because Boise, Idaho, Boise Independent School District, we have 5 members on the Boise School Board. We have a significant number of individuals who were very, very interested. Right? Yeah. Chasing kids to start attention-growing voting blocks. Chasing kids to grow consumers. Parents stop chasing kids to make their rent. The books in our bookstores, the TVs, the movies. It's very much about, what are we doing to program the kids? And we got an awful lot of people in conservative circles, even in progressive circles. But take a look at the U.S. education system. Take a look at pop culture in the United States. Take a look at how influencers influence young kids, teens and younger. Now, an awful lot of them are talking about grooming. Yeah, grooming, it's an ugly word. What we're doing as a nation when it comes to how are we programming or grooming the youth in America. Now, the big one these days is the sexualization of young children through drag shows. Okay. Now, the thing is this isn't new. Toddlers in tiaras, dance troupes, the things that we've taken a look at, child beauty pageants. We've seen about that. The United States has shut down child beauty pageants. Other nations in the world have shut down child beauty pageants because you step back and you go, they're trying to make 6-year-olds look like 22-year-old women. Honey boo boo. Straight up, Toddlers in Tiaras was one of the first ones that really made it big time. You had casualties of that, like John Benet Ramsey. We terminated, in a lot of ways, these kind of beauty pageants, these kind of pageantry that asked children to entertain adults. And we're running into the flip side of it right now, where we have people who sought to ban the beauty pageants of young women, girls. Let's call it what it was. It was girls. The people who sought to ban the girl child beauty pageants are now advocating for the drag shows. This isn't parents, not in a lot of cases. Sometimes it is, but we're dealing with the fallout from the fact that we didn't take the lesson from one cultural fail and apply it to a cultural process that is developing. We can still stop it. We can keep it from happening. Part of that is we need to come up with a holistic solution to the problem of the urbanization of America. You know, the idea of criminality, the idea that, you know, people's bodies are property that can be bought and sold for pleasure, anytime, any place, anywhere. So, drag queens in libraries, books. People have decided, yeah, and yeah, they've overplayed their hand. They've crossed lines. They've crossed a lot of lines. You know, they've been empowered. You know, it very efficiently divides the culture on an emotional level. We want our children to explore. We want our children to be curious because curiosity inspires learning. When we take that curiosity about who they are and turn it into a means of developing prurient interests in adults around them, you know, we start running into significant problems. Um, Afghanistan. Matter of fact, Mike, let's go back to this idea of Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, um, the idea of Sodom and Gomorrah. What was Sodom and Gomorrah? You know, it was the hyper urbanization of, you know, what may or may not have been a Bronze Age society. You know, all of these people crowded into a single area, you know, with hierarchy and, you know, like a Clockwork Orange out seeking a tad of violence, you know, after a night of the in and out. Um, you know, what are we doing with the urbanized youth of America? Now, we ran into situations, you know, 70s, hyperviolence of the gang rivalries, as everybody tried to not nick out, you know, a chunk of property, you know, the fiefdoms of the street gangs of New York. Warriors, warriors, come out and play. You know, and we take that and we apply it. And here we are. We've seen 40 years of a decrease in violence in the United States. People these days aren't violent. They don't have a need to be. Everybody's comfortable. Yet we're constantly being touted and told, you know, the world is more violent, it's more destructive. We're seeing more mass murderers. We're seeing more gun violence, even though all statistics say it is continually going down. All right, now, yeah, this is one of those things where we're looking at garbage in, garbage out. Are the police just not reporting the violence anymore? Is that it? Is that how they maintain their statistics? Broken window communities. No, there's no violence here. Bang, bang, bang. Ah, that didn't happen. What are we doing about violence in America? What are we doing about violence in schools? You know, we talk about it. We look at what's going on. Teachers, librarians, drag queens. We talk about what it is to be different in schools today in late stage state capitalism, where your primary role involves one of two things. Okay, a few more than two. One is you're a producer. Capitalism requires producers in order to produce. And while not everybody's producing, there are other individuals out there that are providing services to the producers. Sexual services in many cases, sex work, intimacy work. And the idea that not everybody can actually find time to have relationships, so they pay for their relationships. Yeah, it happens. Um, yes. What was it about 80s pop culture? You were looking at The Simpsons, you were looking at the Bundys, Al Bundy, the idea of the bumbling fool, um, actually, it was before that because all in the family was that way. You had Archie Bunker. Archie Bunker went out and did his work, but he came home. Meathead, meathead. God, him and Gloria actually had kids, and they continued to live in Archie's house. 3 generations living in the same house, all in the family. Archie Bunker. You know, um, we've seen that. We've seen that. There's a couple shows out there like that. Um, Nickelodeon shows were the big ones for that. You never ever saw the parents. The movie was all about the kids in school. They may or may not have had a teacher that was influential. Never ever saw the parents. What was that? Kids in the Hall? But you step back and you take a look at some of that stuff that was going on. The idea that kids could be self-contained. I know there's, um, yeah, no, Archie was the anchor. He was the one who brought in the money. Gloria, you know, um, that was one of those things because it was the transformation in the ages. Okay, because Archie was that archetypal 50s father, and Gloria was that was his dominant femme daughter. She was an activist. She got out. And Meathead just sort of followed her around and did whatever she wanted him to do. So you saw the difference. Edith, strong, kind matriarch, knew how to manage Archie. You saw that. Didn't manage Archie quite as well as, Jefferson did. That spinoff, you know. But you were taking a look at what was going on with pop culture at the time and what we were moving into. We went through a strong area of what was it we called it? Black exploitation. The idea of all of these black cast movies. None of them were particularly great, yet people went to see the movies. Without regard to race, it didn't matter whether you were black, white, you went to see the movies. You went to see Shaft. I figured Edith was the one you were talking about. Edith, handling Archie, keeping him from being the total irrational, why am I putting up with this leech of a kid who's, screwing my daughter, living in my roof, living under my roof, eating my food. Why am I? Edith was there to say, it's a different generation. Of course, Edith did her own pieces too. You didn't see an awful lot of it, but Edith went out and did the Rotary Club piece, did the church. She played the organ, for Christ's sake. She played the organ in church. Edith. That was part of Good Times, Fresh Prince. Yeah, that was another one. Back when Will Smith was actually tame. Oh yeah, you start taking a look at all of that trend and how that affected, culture, the culture shift. Because Archie Bunker was a suburban. Okay, he was a suburbanite. You didn't have the tall towers. You didn't move into the urbanization until you went into the Jeffersons, where they were living on like the 15th floor of the, penthouse in the sky. You didn't start seeing this moving in of people. Um, yeah. Strong black family, solid values, hard work, broken homes, troubled youth. You saw Fresh Prince. Okay, Will Smith came from a broken family, but he moved into a stable black family with his cousins, that continued to show success. Um, Good times, that was, single mother trying to raise kids, I believe, if I'm right. You were looking at, God, step back and even take a look at the more recent one. Okay. What was the movie about Kevin Costner, doing the numbers thing, hidden figures. That was it. Hidden figures. Okay, hidden figures. The black woman who did the mathematics that sent men to the moon was a single mother raising 3 kids. This was her community. Yeah. It can't be done, folks. It can be done. There's no reason we have to be tied to models that are easily broken. We don't need to depend on these ideas that, because it doesn't meet our idea of ideal, that it won't work, or that it doesn't work. We've proven time and time again, single mothers can raise amazing kids. They can go out and do amazing things. A nuclear family can destroy children. There is no solution that is a fix-all, but it's about becoming capable, being independent, and establishing the boundaries, creating sovereignty. Right? Once or twice a year. And she was a hero 24/7. You know, I don't know why we only bring her up once or twice a year. She was a hero 24 fucking 7. Um, it can be done. Community, you can support people and they can do amazing things. There is no need to depend on models that are so easily broken, so easily twisted. So, Idaho. What were we doing in Idaho that justified so much drama on Twitter? The school boards. Shiva Rabjani. Yes. Boise, Shiva Rabjani. This individual is an 18-year-old high school student. He won a seat on the independent Boise school board. He beat out an incumbent by nearly 10 points. An 18-year-old student is going to be sitting on the school board of the school he is attending for the next year, making decisions. Now, I'm not talking about student leadership, man. This guy is sitting on the board. He's one of 5 people with a vote on curriculum, with a vote on how the money gets spent. One of 5 people. He beat out an incumbent. An 18-year-old kid beat out a school board, the only incumbent that was beat, mind you, All of the other incumbents, the other four, still are holding their seats. Riva, 18 years old, the only one to unseat an independent Boise School District incumbent. The American conservatives in Boise, Idaho are livid. It wasn't bad enough that some of the more liberal incumbents continued to sit. Here we have Riva, 18 years old, Indian heritage. He goes and spends summer with his family in India and then comes back to go to school in Boise. Boise resident, Boise citizen, American. The conservatives are livid because, one, he's got a different heritage. Two, he's a student. Three, he's an activist. And he's sitting on the board deciding what he's going to be taught next year. It's hilarious watching the meltdown. But yeah, and that's what it is. Like, Riva, as a student, knows what he wants to learn. He knows how he needs to be taught to learn. He's there talking with his peers in class, going through the curriculum that previous iterations of school boards have selected and going, this works, this doesn't work. Cope and seethe. Cope and seethe. This is one of the things that we saw. We saw Boise voters turn out and vote for a young man who's still in high school over an incumbent school board member. Exponential school choice. He knows how to create the opportunity because he knows how to advocate for changing the teaching style to facilitate the learning style of Idaho's urban students, Boise's urban students. We're looking at that, libraries, school boards, activism, things along those lines. Next thing up, yeah. Give me a moment. So one of the other things I want to bring up, actually doing it here live, so we had school boards, we had libraries. The rise of Christian nationalism in the state of Idaho. Okay? Rise of Christian nationalism. Oh, sorry about that, Jennifer. That was probably me. Every time I try and flip panels, check and see what it is I got going on, the browser gets a little bit wonky. So sorry about freezing up on you there like that, Jennifer. Christian nationalism in the state of Idaho. One of the reasons why we've been a repository for that in the state of Idaho, and we've been a repository for Christian nationalism and for white nationalism here in Pacific Northwest, ever since, the Civil War, well, even well before the Civil War, before the Mason-Dixon line was created, that defined that if you were a U.S. Citizen, that there was going to be no slavery above a certain line. We saw an awful lot of immigration from states, from people who did not necessarily believe in slavery per se, But they still wanted their white separatist Pacific Northwest. Okay, so we are looking at places in the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, where they didn't necessarily allow slavery because it was above the Mason-Dixon line, but they didn't allow black people to set up permanent residence because this was the white paradise. So we've been dealing with white separatism, white nationalism, white supremacy, ever since white people started settling the Pacific Northwest. The Great Oregon Trail, is all about the white paradise, to the point where Oregon, Washington, and Idaho routinely had cities with deed limitations saying that a white owner could never sell their land, that lot, to somebody of a different heritage. Well, it continues to develop. Idaho, once you get back off of the I-5 corridor, you get people who say, I want a greater Idaho. I want a greater theocratic state. I believe in a Christian nation. I believe that Christians, because of their values, because of their culture, deserve dominion over all others so that we can rule and create a moral place for all others. Now, most of us, when we step back and we go, well, wait. You can't actually do that, because when you go in and you legislate morality, when you use state violence to enforce morality, the good that comes from having the choice and choosing the good is now gone. There's no longer the understanding and the learning of the consequences for the actions that are the natural consequences of the actions. Now you have the state imposing consequences that far exceed any damage that can be done by the natural consequences. For example, God gave us every seed on the earth. It's a Christian faith. That's a Christian concept. God gave us every seed-bearing plant on the earth to use as we saw fit. Allodial title, absolute, cures redlining more efficiently than government. And it does. Idaho actually went through the process where we were allowing, even though it can't be enforced, we still had an awful lot of land deeds here in the state of Idaho that still had that blurb in the deed that said it couldn't be sold to a black man or a black woman. Last year, we actually wrote legislation that would allow people to take their deeds to the county clerk and have that line removed from the land title. Right? Jesus, 2021. And we were still transferring deeds that said you couldn't sell the land to a black person in the state of Idaho. Here we are. We're looking at Christian nationalism and what that represents. Now, we see it happening all across the United States. The idea of Christian nationalism isn't necessarily about white nationalism anymore. Okay. We've come to accept that Christian nationalism encompasses all the races. We understand that Christianity, is a common bond for a large percentage, regardless of how we look at it, whether we're looking at Southern Baptist, and you actually got two different kinds of Southern Baptists, because admittedly, the joy and celebration that you find in a Black Baptist church in the South is significantly different than the kind of worship you find in a white Southern Baptist church. Simple cultural differences there. We come to accept the common bond in the Bible. in so much of the United States. Um, Herb of the plant, two pillars in museum in Israel thought to be from a mosaic. That's Moses, Mosaic era temple. One has frankincense and the other has cannabis residue. So one column was frankincense, the other column was cannabis. It's what they smoke anyway. But yeah, I'm beginning to understand that cannabis has been a part of human history. It has been a part of religious history. Yet here we are in late stage state capitalism, late stage Roman era Christianity, the tail end of the American Crusades that purged the West of the non believers. And we find so many people want to go back to those Mosaic era laws where the state enforces what you eat on Friday, whether or not you're allowed to get a tattoo. It's called mushrooms. Mano was the fun guy at the event. Oh, God. You're making me make bad dad jokes here, Mike. Fun guy Mana. Mano Mana. Yeah. But these are the things. We are looking at this era where biblical law, Mosaic law. We went through an era. Yeah. We went through an era. Christianity, Hebrew, the Old Testament, Mosaic law, Abrahamic law, the rules for tribal communities to succeed, what was clean, what was not, what they could eat, what was the punishment for certain things, the mandatory chemical induced abortion for infidelity. So we like good choices and bad jokes. Because we all know bad jokes are just cope and see. Bad jokes are just a coping mechanism, folks. They really are. It helps us deal with the trauma, the realization of what is becoming part of our culture that has become such an intrinsic part of the American multicultural landscape. What is Christianity? What is the anti-Christian? What is, in here in the state, Idaho, we have, I think we're up to 5 mosques in Boise. 5 mosques. And at least 3 of them serve as madrasas as well. So not only is it a mosque where they worship on the Sabbath, whether that's a Saturday or a Sunday for them, in addition to that, they do after school programs where they provide education for the children. In Islam, we have madrasas in Boise. We have Islamic libraries, Islamic schools. The Islamic, the Bosniak Islamic Fellowship Mosque in Boise. Islamic Bosnians that moved to Boise following, rather difficult period of ethnic cleansing in the Balkans under Clinton. And we are living in a nation, in a state. An awful lot of people see the conservative values that were instilled in Idaho from its birth. Because that's what we were. We had a lot of fundamentalist settlers. The Church of Latter-day Saints, Brigham Young, Joseph Smith, fundamentalists. They were chased out of Missouri, of all places, because they were too conservative. We had the Catholics, the Jesuits that came here and taught. George Bush should be appalled. Thanks, James Doe. Appreciate you actually making it here. I don't have that much. Yeah, well, life happens, man. Life happens. Completely understand that. What we're looking at, the conservative values that were instilled in the state of Idaho because of the religious values. Church of Latter-day Saints, fundamentalists moving out into Utah and eastern Idaho. They moved into western Idaho and into eastern Oregon for a little bit. The Catholics, the Jesuits that came out here as part of the westward migration, and the religious values they set up, spreading the word of the Pope. Idaho, Boise, Idaho has the oldest synagogue west of the Mississippi in the United States. Here we are, we're looking at LDS fundamentalists, we're looking at Catholics who moved out to be farmers, and settlers in Idaho. We're looking at Jewish community that came out here. Greeks that came, Greek, Orthodox that came out here to have religious values, religious conservative values. And an awful lot of people step into Idaho and they want that. They want the Mosaic Law. They want the Abrahamic Law. They want Deuteronomy. And what they miss in this desire for the state enforcement of these religious codes is that the New Testament made it so that these rules no longer needed to apply to so many of us. Oh yeah, the company towns. German's Dutch. Come on, James. But yeah, the company towns that came out, the mining towns. Not so much the farming towns, but the mining towns. The mining towns were all company towns because they were built on the models out of Pennsylvania. You come out, you have a lot of capital, you create the town, and then the town fails because you didn't understand what brought people to Idaho. And this is it, Mike. You absolutely bring up a solid point. Okay, despite the large amount of abusers and trauma inducers, the conflict entrepreneurs that have found their way into Idaho to try and maintain levels of trauma, levels of, abuse, so that we can continue to maintain that state enforcement of morality. We still see healing happen here in the state. We still see people who are capable of finding their peace, independent of the church, independent of the police, independent of the state. We see people who are able to come here and heal. A lot of it. Because that's one of those things, an awful lot of the people running from other states that have been traumatized by the drama in California, by the trauma of urbanization in the United States. They come here looking for that pastoral setting. And they want to be able to live by the codification of the Mosaic Law and the Abrahamic Law. They want to live by Deuteronomy. And they want all of their neighbors to live by Deuteronomy. And they forget the reason that we are able to heal here in the state of Idaho is because of the sense of community, the sense of caring, the sense of teaching and compassion, not of Moses, and not of Abraham, but of Jesus. Love thy neighbor as they love thyself. Yeah, just because some of you hate yourselves doesn't mean that you're entitled to hate everybody else. It's not the way that works, folks. Yeah, I hate to say it. But it's been an hour here, folks. Thank you for listening to me preach. Compassion, caring, all facilitate the healing. Be a good neighbor. Be a good friend. Remember, folks, family, friends, community. As long as you got those three, you can make anything happen. Love you guys. Take care. Read a book. Hug your neighbor. I'll see you next week. Love y'all.